Hi, we're about a few minutes late, but I think we can start now, right? So, welcome to the last session for today in this room, at least. I'm Gayatri. I work with APC on a project called Impact, which works on India, Malaysia, and Pakistan. And our focus is on how to use technology to impact or encourage change, at least. Yeah. Um, the topic we kind of wanted to, we're quite passionate about, and we wanted to discuss a bit with you is on freedom of association and assemblies online. Oftentimes, our protests, our associations are looked at as just forms of expression, right? They are legitimate forms of expression, but there is an additional layer of qualification when we protest online, when we get together as a group of like-minded people, or when we get together as a group of people with a particular aim in mind, no? So we wanted to also look at that act of getting together, of voicing opinions together as a group, as an additional right of freedom of assembly and association online. And as far as APC has been trying to look at this particular right of freedom of assembly and association online, the way we've been approaching it is the use of ICT platforms or ICT tools to either exercise the freedom of assembly and association online purely, or the use of these tools and platforms to ultimately exercise freedom of assembly and association offline. So we've kind of are looking at both these aspects. And one of the things we wanted to do a bit different with this session was to not have a lot of talking just from a few people. We're going to be trying out this with you. If you could log into slido.com. If you just log into slido.com and our code is 727. Or did you want to kind of explain?
It's an anonymous chat room. I'm sure that you have all used this. So basically, you can ask any question and it will show up magically on the wall, and you can vote on each other's questions, and it's anonymous by default. That's it.
Yeah, so you don't have to wait till everybody is done for you to ask your questions. If there's something that comes up to your mind, just type it in and we'll see how to interact on that. So the way we've picked our panel today, and it's a panel of a lot of my favorite people, and the way we've picked the panel today is to try and have sort of a mixed bag here. We of course have friends from the region who will be reflecting on how civil society perceives freedom of assembly and association online in their respective jurisdictions. And then we also have Anki with us, who's going to talk about how Facebook, which is perhaps the most prominent platform in the region through which we assemble and associate, how Facebook has been approaching this issue as well. And then we also have colleagues in the region who have been coming up with alternative ways to push back against the pushback from the state. No? So that's, to me, that's a section that I'm really looking forward to hear. So what do we do besides, only blame the government? How can we pick up and feel empowered to exercise our rights? So we'll start with Mimi. Mimi is from Empower, but Mimi, why don't you introduce yourself first and then tell us how in Malaysia, freedom of assembly and association has been spanning out on the internet.
So, hello everyone. My name is Mimi. I'm working with Empower. So, Empower is an organization that works towards human rights, especially on the women's rights issue as well as the internet rights. So, in Malaysia, right, we are currently doing a extensive research on freedom of assembly and association. So, it is related to the recent case of Bersih Rally, which is it is involved of online spaces has become one of the tools to create movement, especially civil society movement. So I think that's it for the introduction.
That freedom of assembly and association have been strongly exercised online?
So yeah, one of the example how the freedom of association and assembly that has been exercised online is towards the uses of social media. So social media has been a very good platform for people moving towards the um, moving towards how to exercise our FOAA, and also how the ICT has been used to create creative campaign. So one of it is birthday rally, and also there are cases like um, the campaign called Kita Semua Penghasut. We are all seditious by the Fahmi Reza. So yes, thank you.
Who's from India Digital Empowerment Foundation. Ritu, what do you see as the most prominent challenge relating to freedom of assembly and association in India?
The Article 19 of the Constitution of India provides guarantee to the freedom of association and assembly. However, the biggest challenge what we see in India is the virtual curfews, what we call, or network shutdowns. In the last couple of years, we have seen approximately 28 network shutdowns in India, which comprises of more than 41 hours, specifically in a state Jammu Kashmir. Specifically, I will take last 2 years of examples. Like in 2015, there were 14 shutdowns, and within the last 6 months, there are 9 shutdowns. And the reason behind these shutdowns, which have been noted so far, is because of terrorist attacks, social unrest, a beef ban, which is one of the prominent thing in India right now. And this is also and the law which is applicable to allow for the network shutdowns or the virtual curfews is the section 144 of the Criminal Code of the Procedure, or CRPC, and 69A of the IT Act. One of the major challenge, what I'll say also talk about the economic background when these network shutdowns are happening. One of the major thing is that we, in a state like a Gujarat, where we have seen 5 network shutdowns, even for a reason that cheating cases, like the student should not cheat, and the network has been shut down. And that's one of the silly, I should not say that, it's a stupid kind of a thing. Network has been blocked and we have done a shutdown. But also that also impact the economic various ways, that about 16 million USD has been lost because of economic transactions, any banking delays, and any as such processes. So this not only impacts on the to associate and on freedom of association and the assembly, but it also gives a economic drawback as well.
We talked about network shutdowns, which is perhaps is an unfortunate reality in India, right? But I don't want you to end on a negative note. Can you also perhaps highlight 1 or 2 examples where freedom of assembly and association has worked out fantastically online?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to say as well that the freedom of association and assembly has been greatly facilitated online through, like one of the biggest campaign, which was like a early 2009 campaign, Pink Chaddi campaign, which is called the Pink Underwear Garment campaign as well, where group of women was Bangalore, in a city like a Bangalore, collectively made a group on a Facebook, and they started because they were being molested and harassed by some of religious groups, and they have a certain comments on their why do we wear short skirts. So they start sending out certain kind of this pink color undergarment to them, and it collectively in a Facebook group they have about 40,000 likes. Apparently Facebook taken down after that request, but yes, it was one of the biggest campaign online. In a recent last year, what we have seen in a net neutrality campaign, that was a complete massive campaign held by online campaigns. More than a 1 lakh, more than a 10,000 emails were sent to the regulatory body, as well as there were so many campaigns which were happening on the Facebook. People were using Twitter, people were using various social media platforms like change.org. So those were the points when people were picking it up the various social media platforms and trying to assemble and associate, not even online but offline as well. So that was a clear transformation from online to offline, as well as offline to online.
Who's working with Bytes for All Pakistan and is a partner of Impact Project. Tahmina, while you reflect on the situation in Pakistan, can you also perhaps try to tell us what are the grounds, what are the reasons commonly cited for pushback against freedom of assembly and association?
Thank you, Gaya. And as Gaya introduced, I am Tahmina from Bytes for All. We are based in Islamabad, a digital rights organization. I would start the second part of your question first and just try to lay some background. Pakistan is a very conservative society, and the laws are mainly governed by the religion, the majority of the religion, that is Islam. So some of the interpretation of the religion, which I don't want to go into detail right now, is also not very clear representation of the religion, but it's somehow ended in very strict and very conservative regulation. So also society itself is very conservative, and you get judged by society in whatever way you carry yourself, or genders and all that. So I think that's also one of the reasons that we have also started to, since many people in the country, civil society organizations, human rights defenders, they have started to, since the development of technology, started to use social media to, talk about their ideas, development issues, other sensitive topics. So we have seen this this trend that governments and strict regimes try to curb that freedom, offline and online, both right now in Pakistan. It's mainly governed by also national interest and national security narrative, for example. Sorry, it's not very good to hear your own voice. Sorry for the torture. Okay. So, yeah. I think freedom of association and assembly online has faced setbacks in Pakistan very seriously. But again, I would not want to just pick on the negatives, but there are some positive stories alongside as well. For example, there was this campaign called Claim Your Mosques that was started in an online space, which actually we saw also resulting in an offline protest. And it was about religion, because I'll just give you some background, that there is a big mosque in the capital city, Islamabad, run by a cleric called Maulana Abdul Aziz, and he has very extremist ideas, and he was the one who's supporting IS and all these very extremist groups. One of the persons, he started an online campaign to say that this is not the interpretation of the religion that this person is doing. So we should claim our religious spaces the way they are and the way they should be. So he started a campaign and he got a lot of following, and then they also did a offline protest in front of the mosque. So it was a very positive example of changing the narrative and presenting counter narrative as well. But again, there are many other examples which tend to tell us that we still have a long way to go, and there is a lot of improvement that needs to be done. Unfortunately, right now I can say that in terms of regulation, we were not very much going in the right track, but we've been trying to push that back. For example, there is a new legislation coming up on it's called Prevention of Electronic Crime Bill, which is over criminalizing some of the activities that you do online, that includes, curbing your freedom of expression, freedom of association and assembly, especially in context of, marginalized groups in the country. They are not, freely able to assemble themselves on offline spaces. So online was one secure way for them, for example, LGBT groups in the country, because they set a backlash from these religious extremists. So one of the websites that got blocked on the internet was run by LGBTI group people, and they were trying to assemble together, have a set of like-minded people, talk about ideas, talk about sexuality, exchange their views on that, and that website got blocked by the authorities. So this is another negative example of how freedom of association assembly online is being curbed online. I can continue going further on examples, but I think I'll stop here. And
we'll come back.
Sure.
We'll have several rounds, I guess. Two of the key points you made is that perhaps national security and religion are the most commonly cited reasons or pretext for the violations, right? And the fact that traditionally marginalized groups are finding that newfound voice online, which is also now being pushed back. So given that context, we should perhaps move to Min. Min, what has been the experience in Vietnam, and especially with your work in creating an alternative space for these people to have that assembly and association?
Hello, I'm Minh, and I used to be an activist in Vietnam since 18. I found my own organization, and at first we work on climate change, but then we spread out to different topics like LGBT and human rights and education, for example. And in Vietnam, I want to put a little context first, that we have to suffer from all the censor like other country. Like sometimes we used to be blocked by the Facebook used to be blocked in Vietnam for a long time, and they just be back for a few years ago. But every time that there is a protest in the country, they block like half of the traffic to the Facebook. And it also they can also block the SMS with some keyword that you cannot text that word. And sometimes they say that the shark buy the cable under the sea, so the whole internet shut down, something like that. Yeah. So after many years of working as an activist, we found that we need a stronger platform for the activists to organize their campaign. That's us, and when you organize a campaign, it's a lot of interaction that you need to be support online. Like when you organize an event, you need the people to register, right? And you need to manage all the participation. And sometimes the police just come to the hotel or come to the conference and shut down the internet, the electricity, and you need to report to all the participation to move to another place. So it's really hard for organizer to manage everything like that in such a short of time. So we trying to build a platform that can provide different functions like event, competition, volunteer recruitment, and even donation and like crowdfunding. That inside a platform that people can be invited and announced and warning when they involved in a event in the campaign, and they can get the notification when a news event, a new protest, a new meeting will happen. So, but I have to say that it can be blocked by the government also. So it's a like technical problem that we cannot solve by a new platform. Yeah.
Platform that's been existing for a while, and it's become an integral part of many of our lives. So Anki, my question about Facebook is that given that, especially in countries like India, Malaysia, and Pakistan, most of the momentum building happens on platforms like Facebook and Twitter. So how does Facebook view these sorts of attempts by the state to shut down freedom of assembly and association? Do you also see it as a violation of your right to function freely? And how has Facebook been responding to this?
Demographics in a lot of these countries are very young. In India, for example, 65% of the population is under the age group of 25. So we do have a very robust youth bulge in all of these countries. So I still would like to think it's a young platform engaging a very young audience. So, but you raise a much more fundamental point, and this is something which we are seeing jumping up quite a bit in South Asia and Southeast Asia as well. And the trend line is essentially there are the following instruments which are being used in terms of effectuating network shutdowns. I saw one of the questions pop up where somebody sought a clarification as to whether this was a shutdown of the internet or whether it was a shutdown of mobile networks. In some instances, a bit of both, but what has become almost routine in a lot of countries is the kill switch on mobile internet. And what is happening that in a lot of national legislations which exist in India as well as in other neighboring countries, it is written into the blocking provisions is written into the ISP licenses in the national telecom regulation which exists in a lot of these countries. And therefore, whenever there is a law and order problem, law enforcement agencies as well as governments, both federal and sub-federal, in cases where there is a federal government which is in power, routinely authorizes issuance of orders, blocking orders, which essentially means that your entire network is going to be shut down. The mobile internet is going to be shut down. In India, we already talked about it. We've had, up until now, we've had 10 mobile internet blockings across various states. And this does not include Jammu and Kashmir. So that has been the frequency with which this has been used. It's also been used in other countries. The reason most often which is advanced is one of national security. And as events have shown in our region, and you are aware of this, the frequency of the terror attacks have also grown. So there are some legitimate concerns which national security agencies and governments have in terms of making sure they are keeping people safe and fighting terror, and that seems to trigger some of this. Insofar as Facebook is concerned and our policies are concerned, we generally do not, I mean, it's a stated position and we've made that very clear. We've taken positions on this. Our mission is to help build a more open and connected world. We are a very mission-driven company, and that's what is the basis of the company philosophy. But we also recognize and we see this trend that increasingly the world is becoming more closed, and from Brexit to what have you are all indications of that, whether it's on the economic opportunity side or just in terms of free expression, and that's something which is very worrisome. What we've done is that we've constantly advocated for open and free internet. We've advocated against shutdowns. We've also cited this particular instance that the United States, I mean the Cybersecurity Command Control, even in regions which have been designated as ISIS territories and where literally, you know, sort of actions against terrorist activities are going on, the internet has not been shut down in those areas because the net disservice to the local populations, which can be caused as a consequence of that shutdown, is far more than the harm which could be caused by those networks being up. And also, I mean, in Europe, if you look at after the Brussels attack or even the kind of the periodic attacks which are happening there is no network shutdown which is happening. And I think this particular part of the world has to recognize that the value of keeping the system up is much more than shutting it down. One could argue that these platforms could be used for counter speech to educate people when a bad event happens, like a terror strike happens, as opposed to shutting it down. So we've been advocating a lot in terms of using the platform and talking about the value of counter speech and the value of communities and governments to use this in crisis situations. At the same time, we are also working through various coalitions in different countries to make sure that we're shining the light in terms of bad regulation which exists in terms of giving fuel to these kind of repetitive shutdowns. In terms of our responding, I mean, that is how we sort of deal with shutdowns as on a principles basis. In India, we had this very egregious section which was struck down by the Supreme Court after a long fight, which is Section 626A, which chilled a lot of expression on the internet, and that came after a long fight, and eventually it went to the courts. Another trend line which we are seeing is that eventually a lot of the civil society actors, public intellectuals, companies and platforms will have to come together and form these kind of coalitions and really exercise options and seek judicial review to get a lot of these laws either repealed through a judicial review process or read down. That is what we are seeing in India to a certain extent. I think in Pakistan as well, you know, these are the kind of things which we are seeing in terms of just seeking a judicial review and getting corrective measures as a consequence of those judicial review. So that is what I'm seeing in the region, and that's what our approach is as a company.
Thanks, Sangeet. Audrey, I wanted to ask you a very specific question. No? Given that this is the state of affairs, there's only that much we can do because we are reliant to a great extent on the state to stop doing what it's doing or asking the state to do something that they're not doing. But my question to you is, what can we do as citizens when we want to protest or when we want to assemble or associate? What can we do differently that to an extent protects us, or lets us exercise that right?
Right. So your question is, given that the state is in the state, and what can the civil society and the citizen do to effect real change? That's essentially, because here is Taiwan. My standard answer is going to be that you occupy the parliament for 22 days, because that's what happened here in 2014, and it did effect a lot of changes. And because we occupy the parliament not just for protest, it's a demonstration, not in the traditional sense, which is just protesting, but a demonstration in the internet sense, which is a demo, a implementation, a proof of concept. And so we occupy the parliament for 22 days, but during those 22 days, what we did was demonstrating a new kind of deliberation process, a peaceful talk-based participatory democracy that comes up with real consensus, uniting the activists that are previously divided. And we used exactly the same technologies like stenography or real-time broadcasting and transcription and things like that to effect this change. And once people see that this is possible, the demand they have on the state changes. Instead of just having the state change a owner, that is to say a president or something, they demand a change in the process. And this is, I think, a concrete proof of concept. Always trumps talk. The code, running code always works.
Right? So given that we have very specific challenges at a theoretical level, I completely understand what you're saying. But given the practical challenges, if the state shuts down the network, so what do we do?
So during the Occupy, we did not have an internet shutdown. We had a meltdown because the 3G network was just not up to 500,000 of people on the streets. And the electricity was cut, not the internet was cut. So not just landline, but mobile, but everything around the occupied area. So we built everything from the ground up, the cable, the radio, power. We used the WiMAX spectrum, which nobody uses in Taiwan, to multiplex the internal network. We use FireChat, which is a mixed Bluetooth-based like local network to do passing messages around, and we set up local decision-making stations like Lumio based on the local hosting. So basically, if you have sufficient number of activists who are also trained in mesh networking, you can get get a working internet to 500,000 people in a reasonable degree. Not to say that it works all the time, but it works reasonably so that people can organize themselves.
If you would like to add, or is there anything you want to show, or shall we move to? Yeah. Okay, maybe we should probably look at some of the comments. Some of them seem really interesting. Is there anything here that you'd like to respond to?
Specific question which I saw, which wanted to understand what are the specifics of Facebook advocating against shutdown. I think we've taken very open positions in terms of opposing shutdowns in a variety of countries, and this has come both from founder level statements. Our CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg has taken to Facebook in terms of protesting and also opposing shutdowns as a core value and a principle. Recently, with the shutdown of one of our family of apps, which is WhatsApp, there was solid opposition expressed to that. We expressed opposition to that. In addition, what we are doing is that in the South Asia region, we have routinely been part of various internet industry association efforts to oppose these kind of blanket bans and these kind of shutdowns. We are also currently evaluating, and this is something I think it's important to do that and put this on paper to get governments to understand this. The economic harm of shutdown, that really has to be quantified to the governments. Governments increasingly get nervous and use shutdowns as a mechanism to quell protests. They see internet only as a protest mechanism and a protest hub. They do not understand, they do not fully embrace or appreciate the economic harm which is caused by shutdown, by internet shutdowns and network shutdowns. So the time has come to sort of quantify that in a fairly robust way and explain to them the net loss to jobs, economic growth, which is caused by these network shutdown. And once that happens, maybe a joint advocacy both on the right side as well as on the economic harm side will be enough to clearly establish that this is just not a good idea. This is just not a sustainable idea, and it's not a good idea. So we have to come up with very strong economic arguments to convince them that this is not the right path on which any country should be embarking on.
I think I want to put on a little bit that in Vietnam, the government, I think they have a quite smart strategy to shut down the network. That's like, normally they only shut down like half of the traffic of Facebook, and only Facebook, and only in big city, that is hard for people to receive the information about the protests and to update the information about the protests. And it just come back right after the protests finish, and they never agree that they shut down the network. It's just the problem that no one knows why. And for 2 years they blocked the Facebook. They never say that they blocked the Facebook. They just say that is a technical problem of the ISP. And for the internet shutdown, they only have like some kind of car with the hardware to destroy the signal just around the protest area. So it's like trying to reduce the economic loss of the shutting down.
Yeah. Maybe we can take some questions and comments in addition.
Hi, my name is Maria Umar, and I'm the president founder of an organization in Pakistan called the Women's Digital League. My question is for Facebook. So my question is that recently we came across a case where a famous Pakistani celebrity who's very well known on Facebook, Hamza Ali Abbasi, 2 of his posts were taken down by Facebook. His account was deactivated and then reactivated, and Facebook apologized on both occasions. First was when he was talking about a religious minority in the country, the Ahmadiyya Muslims. The second time was when he was protesting against the killing of an internet activist for Kashmiri freedom. Both times Facebook just decided on its own that these were, banned words and these posts should be taken down. And only after much uproar were they, put back on. And so I want to know, how do you decide, based on those hashtags? And also, a lot of content is being shared which is in regional languages, like Pashto. Pashto is one of those languages, but I also see that being a Pashto speaker, I get messages from Facebook that, can you help us translate this or help us translate that? So while this translation is happening, there's about 51% done already and more being done on Pashto. So how come even now you're unable to kind of put censorship on those? Or even if I come to you and I translate it for you and there are 50 other people voting for it that yes, the translation is correct and this is something that comes under harassment and you should shut it down, those pages still don't get shut down. So how do you work around that? Just need to understand.
Yeah, so I think first of all, I want to dissociate this entire terminology of censorship which is associated, because that's not what we do. Facebook is an intermediary, and like an intermediary, we are sort of the principle which we apply is a notice and takedown system, right? So people routinely flag content. We have a mechanism of 24/7 review. We are increasingly building language capability in terms of looking at regional language content when they get reported to us. And as there was another session which was happening earlier, and local language content capacity is just a hard problem to solve. It's just like hard to have 100% local language capability. It's a very hard problem to solve. And platforms are working on smart transliteration tools, but they're also looking at having more and more human reviewers who have the right language capacity to look at these questions. It's a global problem, it's a complex problem, and it's not 100% perfect, but it's a system which works. And the internet, as you know, there's so many different kinds of languages in this whole wide world, but there are only 10 languages which dominate the internet, right? Like 80% of the internet is dominated only by 10 languages. So it's hard to build those kind of capacities. In terms of the specifics of the case, I have some recollection of it, but not a whole lot in terms of what actually happened. But it's an example of the types of things which happen, and I'm just going to refer to that as an example of types of things which happen. So when our user community flags content to us, there we have teams which are reviewing these kind of escalations for violation of international standards and also violation of our community standards. And if it is a violation, it goes down. As part of that process, because there are like billions of pieces of content which get reported, we do make mistake. And when that gets highlighted to us, which is why we believe in having active dialogue with community groups, civil society organizations, etc. And as they get flagged to us, we kind of reinvestigate that, and that do get restored, as happened in this particular case. In the more edgier case which you talked about, where there is valorization of terrorism or valorization of terrorists, we do not allow terrorist content on our platform. It's a very clear sort of a declaration which is made as in our terms of service and in our community standards. And very clearly, if somebody is on the DTO list, and if there is DTO's designated terrorist organization list, and there is valorization of or celebration of terrorism, which potentially could be used as a recruitment material, that is something we definitely will take down. If there is content which is talking about terrorist activity to raise awareness of the bad effects of terrorism or the harm caused by that's a different story. That kind of speech is protected speech and it is allowed. But glorification of terror acts, valorization of terrorism certainly is a violation of our community standards, and those will go down. So that, I hope that answers your question.
There are a couple of more questions, but a lot of it seems to be directed at Facebook. So we're going to take a quick break and see if there are any other questions or any other perhaps questions, and also more importantly recommendations we have as a group here on how do we deal with these sort of pushbacks and violations. Is there anything around the room that anybody has to contribute? No? Okay.
Hello, sorry. I just wanted to make a comment that, these governments and authorities, when they try to block internet or communications or shut down websites or whatever, I think they need to be more rationalized on what they are doing. For example, this earlier example I was giving of this cleric in Islamabad. A couple of months back, almost on every Friday, there was a complete network shutdown happening in the city. And we were all wondering that what's happening, what's the reason? And then eventually we found out that this cleric is actually streaming his Friday sermons, which are very extremist views he is, sharing around on this channel. And the government, instead of, stopping that person, they actually stopped the public to access communications and internet and phones. So all the businesses on Friday, all the communications, hospitals, everything emergency you needed was stopped just because this cleric was, giving sermons and he was streaming it. So I think it's on the governments and on the authorities to see what they are doing and how they can stop a problematic speech, for example. So that's something I wanted to share as well. Gaya, over to you, Gaya.
Anki has to leave. Thanks a lot, Anki. I think you took a lot of our questions, and thanks a lot for clarifying a lot of that. So, is there anything else that yeah?
I think there's one very important challenge which we are facing on the internet today, particularly from the content provider sites like Facebook and other social media platform. We don't have a mechanism to probably identify the authenticity of the content. So there are all kind of rumors which goes onto the content provider network, which the end user are not sure. And they get carried away with those contents. And like we have seen in India, the cases of riots which are happening in Myanmar, and they has been posted as being from Indian states, and it kinds of radicalizes the common public, and it also and obviously government react to it. They always find an easy way of shutting down the network. While I'm not supporting that, but at the same time, there's a challenge which a technological community has to answer. So I want to ask the community here, particularly from a technology perspective, is there any move in that direction?
Okay, there are a couple of questions there. So can we take those two and then try to? I'm going to write down the questions.
I'm really glad that you raised that point, because I was going to say that because during Bersih 4 rally, the official website of the organizer was shut down, but that doesn't really cause much troubles because people relied on Facebook for dissemination of informations. Informations like, what do you do when you get arrested? What do you bring to a rally, and so on and so forth. But then what we see again is a slew of misinformation, which the organizer has to take a lot of efforts to verify every single information. And this is also used by governments to, as an excuse to take legal actions against the people. And on top of that, we are also seeing how platforms like Facebook are being used to perpetrate harassment against the organizer of Bersih 4, who was a woman. So her photos, a group of people made up a huge poster, a live poster of her, and just splash a red paint on her. And these photos were circulated online. And we also have cases of young girls wearing the rally T-shirts being circulated online and commented on. All sort of sexist comments were being made. So while internet has helped with FOA online, but there's also the other aspect that we have to look at. So there's a need to balance, freedom of expression against our rights to privacy, especially for women and the LGBT community. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. It's also, I have a thought to share as well. Hi, I'm Nika from the Philippines, from the Philippine Internet Freedom Alliance. So let me share a story in the Philippines. When we talk about private sector, we talked about like intermediaries, right? But we should also talk about there's this slice of the private sector, which is the corporate media, no? That can also affect our right to freedom of association and assembly, online and offline. So there's this something happened in the Philippines called the Million People March, where there were 1 million people, not really a million, 100,000, hundreds of thousands of people organized themselves and went to a park, a national park, and protest against the pork barrel of the legislators in the government, legislators, right? And then this protest rally was actually organized online, and the organizers were really anonymous. Like some of them were like thinking or they wanted to remain anonymous, and they don't want to like take responsibility on this particular assembly, no? So they don't want to be interviewed by the media. They don't want to tell the people that there are like organized groups that are, you know, organizing this protest rally, simply because it's like a spontaneous action. There's like someone just posted a Facebook event page, and he invited like people, maybe we can, you know, have a picnic in this national park. And then people were like started clicking, going, and you know, and this just gone viral. So so the thing is, corporate media would want to, you know, to talk about this event in the national television, and they wanted to like ask who are the organizers. And you know, and there's this the people who just, you know, created the event page doesn't really want to say that they're the organizers. They just, you know, posted something online and wanted to invite people and tell people that, you know, but there are, you know, the media would like to know who, and they wanted to, you know, try to investigate, and just know who these people are. And these people doesn't really want to be identified because it compromises their, it will compromise them, no? And in turn, and in effect, it can this right to anonymity that has been compromised can also lead to restriction on the right to freedom of association. I mean, on the right to freedom of association and assembly. So I'm just, you know, sharing this story in the Philippines. And this, I think, can happen in different countries, no?
I think that's a really crucial point, because so far we've only looked at online violations being contained in the online space, right? But there's another very serious and dangerous aspect of having offline consequences for these sort of online violations, especially in a country like Bangladesh, where recently an LGBT activist was hacked to death. He was running a website, he was running a group for supporting other LGBTI persons in the state. And the way he was identified was really because the state was clamping down on these sort of associations and assemblies. Similarly, several bloggers have been killed who had taken part in protests and had used online spaces to, you know, mobilize people against state policies when it came to religion or religious issues. And I'm sure in Pakistan and India as well, we have several instances where there have been severe offline consequences for these online violations. Is there any other question, or shall we? Okay, so we'll go back to the question you asked about the technological challenges after this one.
Thank you. My name is Kenny Huang, Executive Council member of APrIGF. Sorry, I'm a little bit lost because I've been sitting here, listening about network shutdown and also some sort of outage or some sort of content takedown. But I'm not sure, is because the content takedown or any network shutdown could be service quality issue, could be the company internal policy issue, could be regulation issue, could be domestic jurisdiction issues. So I'm not sure what kind of issue caused that kind of problem. Is anything internet governance can do to mitigate that kind of situation or harmonize the global accessibility for the human right? Thank you.
Actually, I'm glad you asked that question because it relates to two of the other comments made here. Because there was a couple of comments here about what have platforms done against network shutdowns and who are these people asking for network shutdowns, right? So given that is there some clarity on how are you identifying that network shutdowns are actually in response to freedom of assembly and association?
There are three kind of a network shutdowns. Yeah, okay. Sorry. So there are three level of a network shutdowns. We have seen it. We call it virtual curfews. One is the telecom network shutdown, like totally completing that ISP and the telecom has been asked to not to provide the services. In a case of a Manipur case or certain case of a Muzaffarnagar case when the blocking has been happened at a telecom level. There have been cases which goes beyond like a application layer level where WhatsApp has been blocked, Facebook has been blocked because of a certain other reasons. For example, that beef is banned in India right now. So there's a crucial social kind of a barrier is there. Second is that students should not do the cheating, so the WhatsApp has been blocked. Okay, so there's a two level for blocking. One is a telecom layer blocking. Second one is an application layer of blocking. So what and the reasons what it has been given as well to maintain the social stability, to maintain not to provoke communal violence, to not to maintain national security. These things have been given in this network shutdown, but it has not been clarified what this network shutdown has been. What reasons? What are the specific reasons that you are blocking those networks? Okay, and I'm forgetting another question, set of a question what he has asked as well.
What can internet governance forums do to address it?
Yeah, so the one thing which I can think about it, the counter speech is really important. As I think someone has mentioned about it, that if it is important that we can occupy that space, that this is and do a live telecasting, whatever ways we can occupy that space and use alternative technology, that this is not the misinformation should not lead it from if it is a communal violence kind of a space. That would be really helpful. Like in a case of a Manipur case, when certain things were happening in a Bangalore and people were not allowed, when people were traveling from a Bangalore to their location of a Manipur, there was a lynching of a total communal violence was happening it. But yes, there was a mislead of information which was like replicated drastically. So this could be the one solution. Even the platforms like when we have seen in a one case when there's a politician who was talking about that about Delhi, you might be aware about the Delhi gang rape when the politician has came out that girls should not wear short dresses. So the location from the other city, there were people from other city where came out, people from a private sector and young generation came out wearing the short dresses, and specifically they were men. Joining on the parks and showing that we are allowed to wear short dresses. So even the mobilization can happen. The one Facebook post can also help the other people to be protest that way.
I just want to add, I think Ritu's covered it brilliantly, but because this is an ongoing and burning issue in India, I just wanted to add a couple of points. How we know that it's not accidental, it's very much systemic, is that if on a particular day I'm having internet and then suddenly a protest starts, for a whole week everything has been going fine, and then a protest starts and suddenly network disappears. If it happens once or twice, it's different. But DAF has done an extensive study. Other groups in India have done an extensive study that shows clearly when these network shutdowns are being imposed. So there's a clear trend. Second thing is that they actually give orders to the telecom authorities to shut it down. They ask them to do what we refer to as kill switch. They ask them to shut the whole network down. And the third reason why we definitely know that this is a systemic issue is because one of the lawyers went to court against one of these orders to shut down the network. And really, unfortunately, the court, I don't think the court was ready yet at that point to look at that issue at length. The way the court saw it is like how if we are imposing emergency or if we are imposing a public order situation, just like how we can say people shouldn't come out to the streets, we can also say that you can't have telecommunications for a particular period of time. But the court has not looked at what happens to health services, what happens to emergency services, what happens to the economic sector. That's completely been blindsided in that case. And I also wanted to kind of respond to your question on internet governance, which is really at the heart of this whole discussion, right? So what do we do? The point Anki made is very important. I think we have to come at it from different angles. But more importantly, I think right now there is no recognition that network shutdowns is against our rights. I think that's actually the problem, is network shutdowns is being seen as a practical solution. While at the Geneva level, we've been pretty successful in getting internet rights recognized as human rights, and at least human rights being recognized on the internet spaces. There have been resolutions at that level, but similarly efforts need to be made to address the particular issue of network shutdowns. And states have to be able to talk to each other and say, you know, this might not be a great idea, you know. That's really what has to be discussed. So Gul had a point.
Exactly what they are saying, but just I wanted to add a little point to it, that in Pakistan, the telecom companies, when they get orders from the government, they have started to actually send SMSs to the users telling in advance that this is the day the network would be off. For example, on National Parade Day, on the 23rd March, because the rehearsals were happening and there was army everywhere rehearsing the parade, 3 days prior to that event, network started to cut off, and that was informed by the telecom companies to the users through SMS messages. So that's how I think is also, I think we need to look into it, because this is one way of actually trying to legitimize it, that we are telling you in advance that you make alternative arrangements, and obviously without mobile phones, what kind of alternative arrangements we would make, because landlines don't really work.
We have Gul, and then we have one question from there, right?
Gul Bukhari, also from Pakistan, Bites for All. I just wanted to also provide a little bit more backing to what Ritu and Tahmina and Gaia are saying. It is actually quite transparent. Often the government announces it itself, sometimes it doesn't. We can always tell when there's a breakdown, an accident, and that's completely different. And breakdowns don't happen across every telecom provider at the same time, right? So these are kill orders. The issue here is, we also need to talk about, one is a rights approach, of course. The other is that it's like killing the messenger, not the message, because often it's happening even with electronic media, not just with online. For example, there are some organizations which are banned. These are extremist organizations. And however, they are carrying on their activities publicly on the roads in very visible areas. But the media is asked not to cover them. So the issue is you go and get the actual on-ground activity if it is illegal. But you are making it illegal. It's communication to the masses. Similarly, if children are cheating, you take care of the cheating, not shut down WhatsApp, right? We have to point out these anomalies. There are several, I mean, even the khutbah that Tahmina talked about every Friday. So, and that khutbah is done from under it's in the capital. It's like less than a kilometer away, the mosque, from all of the important national buildings like the top intelligence agency, the parliament, the presidency, and so on and so forth. He sits there and does it every Friday. But the government goes and shuts down our networks. They're not stopping him. So there are other issues connected to all of this, and we have to recognize those as well, and we have to challenge governments over those. Thanks.
Hello. Yeah. I have a question to, to Audrey. Very interesting, the story you say about how people also learned about the process of democracy. So it's developing a different form of democracy and participation. Now, what I'd like to know is that after that event, what sort of impact has it made? Do you see any changes? Are people now participate? Is there more democracy, and in what ways has it happened?
Can you take that question as well as the question on what do we do with the technological
can I take
challenges.
5 minutes? I have some slides. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, you have a question? Yeah, while the slide is showing.
So I think what happened in Taiwan is really interesting. I think one of the biggest challenge when it comes to protests, not only in Malaysia but Bangladesh, is how do you allow the right information to actually flow and not to be controlled by government. So how do you make sure that what actually happens inside was sent or represented by media or other platform?
So I actually have a 5 minutes, very short slides, but that deals with the two questions, so if you would allow me. Yeah, Taiwan actually has a very long history of military dictatorship and censorship and whatever that was lifted around the end of the 80s. And so basically for us, the personal computer and internet arrived at a time where the government says, okay, maybe censorship isn't the best idea. But some of them actually still lingers, and which is why we continue to have fights about the freedom of assembly and association in the early part of this century. But I would first echo the rights-based approach. I think it's the only working approach that this is the Human Rights Council, United Nations, earlier in this July. They passed a resolution, basically HRC 32, I think part of Article 19, saying, states it's just a very bad idea to prevent or disrupt access to anything that's online. And when we last had this kind of contest, it was between commercial interest via the IP office, and this is something very much like the Stop Online Piracy Act, and they, like the American lawmakers, confused the IP level and DNS level blocking with the content level blocking, exactly as Dr. Kenny Huang has said, because the lawmakers didn't really have a lot of idea in the internet governance. So what we do is, as a coalition from both the civil society and the private sector and the Taiwan Economic Association, we blanket out our website, basically taking a page from the anti-SOPA movement, and urge people to ask that this is the website I maintain, and it mobilized maybe millions of people per month, and so they did write thousands of emails and real mails to the committee, which by law they had to respond one by one. So it's a denial of service attack on the IP office, and they did cave in like after 24 hours, basically saying, okay, it's a really bad idea, sorry, we have to rethink it. And the other thing is that cyberbullying, while of course something or like the terrorism recruitment must be curtailed, it must not be confused with the blockage of the internet. And like the Communication Decency Act in 2013, the National Communication Commission had this very bad idea of, allowing IP and DNS level blocking over the indecent or whatever cyberbullying speech. Fortunately, it was blocked by people inside the administration, which is Simon Zhang, who would later be our premier. At that time, he was the Minister of Cyberspace, and Tsai Ing-wen was the leader of DPP, now our president. So the idea is to get a few people in the government or in the administration or in the opposition party to really understand what IPv6 means and things like that. And then they would stand up and refuse this kind of thing. And about making the flow of information flow faster than misinformation, this is actually from Dr. Kenny Huang's speech last year. No? Okay. Well, in any case, this is the occupation slide, but this is topology. The basic idea is that we set up projection screens on the two sides of the occupied parliament so that people who are in the occupied place see the street and the people in the street see the occupied places, so that there really is no room for the rumor to spread. And just like this setup, we have a stenographer typing everything she sees. Here's inside the occupied parliament, so people on the street see the real-time transcript, so they don't even have to put on earphones to see what's going on. And once we do that, there's no room for rumors to spread. And we do that because the civic tech community in Taiwan already had this kind of experience working with the Facebook. We had this News Helper Chrome extension or browser extension. If you install it, then when a misinformation spreads, it shows a warning that says, warning, you may be a victim to a counterfeit information. And then just like the Microsoft information, and then it's basically a crowdsourced way to curtail misinformation. And so finally, to answer the idea, the question about how did the occupiers do, basically the occupiers won the local level elections. One of them went on to be the Taipei city mayor. And then the national government basically started to use IETF kind of way to make internet policy, which is again corresponding to the HRC recommendations. So this is the kind of laws we did with the consultation process involving multi-stakeholders. And because of time, I wouldn't go into the details of the Uber or Airbnb case, but the idea is that we use this process And out of thousands of participants, we invite people who make contributions into working group contributors and to make things. And I think really the censorship or network blockage involves 4 different layers. And for each layers, we have to have answers to the existing lawmaker that says, you know, this is a better solution at the content level and don't touch the infrastructure level. Unless we have people who come up with alternate solutions, it will always be more convenient for them to say, you know, IP or TCP level block breakage is easier. So the 4th thing, just very briefly, is privacy, is cyberbullying, is the Communication Act, which we work with the content providers to do something that's very much like real-time watermarking or things like that and leave the content out of the infrastructure layer. And finally, the Copyright Act. So basically what I'm saying is the administration can learn if we show them how exactly to make this kind of communication with the people. So the idea is just to make laws with the people. Thank you.
Smita had another question.
No, actually, it's a comment. He basically answered everything, but I actually no, I was aiming at Serene. You asked about the flow of information, right? Like, so recently, last December, in fact, there was a big flood in one of the cities in India, Chennai, and there was a lot of communication issues there because power went, network towers went, everything went. So a lot of the mobilization for relief was happening from people who were outside the city and outside the state, in fact. And there was quite a few alternative arrangements which was done by us. We didn't have the technology to actually do crowdsource information and say which is real and which is false. But what really happened was the people, because they had connections to few people in the city, you could just make sure that you amplify the information which is verified. It's as simple as that. If you share a verified piece of information 10 times on Facebook, it will reach 5 people. And that worked really well in case of Chennai. I mean, it's a different situation. Yes, that was a disaster, and this is during protests. So obviously there will be arrangements which will have to be made to distinguish between them. But his way is more cool.
Like they say, most protests are disasters, no? Is there anything else that you'd like to comment on?
Well, thank you. I just have a very short question coming back to the topic of shutdowns. I was wondering, what is the justification of the governments to shut down the networks? I mean, could there be any justification that you would agree with, or I mean, in case of Taiwan, it was a very peaceful demonstration, but there might be demonstrations of a more violent character. I don't know.
So out of 28 shutdowns, that 17 shutdowns was said that it's because of a national security and maintain the social stability and to maintain not to provoke communal violence. But it's not been stated appropriately that in what layers the shutdown is being happened. For example, like in a cheating case, they haven't came out with any kind of a listing why there's a shutdown, why the application layer has been is overly blocked in a Gujarat, like a WhatsApp has been blocked, and this was blocked for a day. A day it has been blocked. Then the question has to be. There should be a proper mechanism from the government as well, that why it has been blocked and what are the reasons it has been blocked and at what level we are blocking as well. But there's no as such listing which has come up from the Indian government as well.
Question from Yasmin.
Well, actually, I just wanted to also answer the question and make a further comment. Hi, I'm Yasmin from Malaysia. I think that different countries have different requirements as to how far a government needs to justify the actions in blocking. But I think those of us who live in, shall we say, less democratic societies, we recognize that at the end of the day, the government doesn't need to justify anything. That is the truth of the matter. In Malaysia, for example, like our commission that regulates, like basically internet affairs, and also blocks, like certain websites, they do provide information as to why they're blocking certain websites, but the information is often incomplete. And in some cases, they don't actually provide the information. For example, when the Bersih website was blocked ahead of Bersih 4, they didn't actually provide justifications for that. And sometimes they provide retroactive justifications, so they will only come up with a press statement later, if they do at all.
My name is Satish. There's actually a technical reason why stopping of network services may be useful. This is because there has been cases of terrorists detonating explosive devices using the public network. So there is this government, especially when it is pre-announced. One of the reasons could be this. Thanks.
Sorry, Kenny Huang again. Basically, I'm just starting to realize what the problem is. And I believe they should have government officer from India, especially I know one of the chairman of Indian ISP Association was here, but I couldn't see him. Probably he can answer the question much better than I do. And the second is, we listen a lot of input from different stakeholders, mentioned about that eventually government just make a decision on its own. But basically, you assume the condition, the government will just ignore any voice, just do whatever you want. But basically, we realize the capacity building not only for the end user, but also for the public sector as well. That's why the capacity building is a critical element in the infrastructure development. So that's why we have Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance. You can see a lot of participants basically from public sector. They come here for learning, to sharing the information, to sharing the experience as well. And APrIGF, we set up a APrIGF Foundation. The purpose of foundation is one way is doing capacity building, the other is to provide infrastructure enabling. So I encourage you looking at the information provided by APrIGF Foundation. Perhaps some of information or some of program could be useful, not only for yourself, but also for your government officer as well. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Nayantara from the Internet Democracy Project. I wanted to find out if anybody has views on some more passive kinds of government interference of freedom of association and assembly, like the use of IMSI catchers, which I recently learned about, where each and every phone each and every SIM card which has an international mobile subscriber identity can be captured by a surveillance device that is placed at a protest, for example, and kind of find out who are the people attending this protest. So I think that's a really insidious way of, and a passive way of disrupting the freedom of association and assembly, where you don't even find out what's happening. And in countries like India, where it's really hard to get any information about what surveillance technologies are being deployed, to what extent they're deployed, what the justifications are, with absolutely no oversight, it's really hard to get, I mean, it's just a black box with, you don't understand anything. So if there's any thoughts or ways, or I don't know, I just wanted to bring that up.
Any responses to her question of, besides network shutdowns, these more subtle ways of surveillance, intimidation?
Just one small incident that I've recently heard in Pakistan. There was a closed door meeting happening, and there was this book sitting outside, and he activated through his phone, he activated somebody's phone sitting inside the room, and he started to listen to, and he actually showed this to the person who's told me, my friend actually. So I think there is some kind of technology advancement in that way going on. So I think I agree with what Nayantara is saying, that there are some other ways and you need to look into those as well.
I actually had a response. Is it okay if I just respond to one of the questions? Your question about the real danger of detonating of bombs, right? This is actually one of those justifications states give that shocks you, and you obviously can't argue with this, right? Because it sounds so scary that you don't want to engage with that question. But then my question would be, is there at least some sort of perceivable or reasonable expectation that that's the case in all these network shutdowns? Is there some basis by which they're coming to that conclusion? No, that's one question. The second question is that the only way they can detonate the bomb? They're far more advanced than we are, right? They can use networks that are far more different. And there's also the question of the balancing it off, right? The pros and cons of doing something. Sorry, Nika, you had a point.
Yeah, sorry, I think this is a different thing.
No, that's fine.
I just remembered I just remembered something about this proposal, no? about protest in Asia, like we don't really have this practice of having like a surveillance technology that can, that can record, no, not surveillance, but can be a recording what is happening in a protest action, but its goal is to make sure that the police is not doing, violence in dispersing protest. No, I'm just floating this because I know in the U.S. and in other Western countries they have that where you can make sure that the police are accountable to their actions. But in the case of our region, that's not happening, and that's something that I think we can also talk about when it comes to privacy and protests, like because in my experience we rely on the media to cover or to protect us, no, to just have a camera there so that if something happened to us, the media will be able to capture it. But in Asia, where there's really corrupt corporate media, then they will just they will just record what they want to that can look good for the government and not really covering or exposing what's really happening on the ground. So that's something that I think we can also look at, because I remember this is already talked about in this roundtable discussion with the UN Special Rapporteur, no, about technology and protests. So I don't know what, I haven't really thought about it, but maybe we can also talk about it.
I'm going to respond to you as I pass the mic to Nick, because there's a really serious issue there as well. With the case of Bangladesh, for instance, because when the Shabak movement happened, and then there was an Occupy sort of a thing that happened in Bangladesh, 16 to 17 people, according to different reports, at different numbers, were shot and killed. But the thing is, there was a network shutdown. So the media could not take the media was not able to send images out because it was pitch dark, and nobody could record what was happening. So there was that additional danger of not being able to send information out. That's actually an integral part of that issue there.
I think that's a double-edged sword, though. Kind of us capturing like the saffron revolution in Myanmar and Burma taught us that independent media and protesters covering their own protests has been used to arrest them, like locate them in protests and use that to arrest. That's also happened, I think, in the earlier days of Versi in Malaysia, where videos captured during protests were then used to further put people into trouble, basically. So I think that's a great kind of taking into consideration the context of corporate media in our countries and kind of the non-transparency in the way these things are covered, but also kind of the other end of the spectrum, which is it actually might be used to further have offline effects on people who are protesting as well.
Follow up to this line of thought. So last month I was in Spain to talk with activists who occupy the 15M movement, which is in Spain, and then the France Nuit Debout, and then Tunisian and the New Zealand occupiers and me. So basically 5 occupiers who use the same set of tools because we fork each other's GitHub repositories. So the idea is that we're kind of enablers of this kind of occupy or protesting. And one thing that we learned over our mistakes, and of course some successes, was that you only go to the super public way of surveillance and recording everything by yourself when you have critical mass and you know you're winning and you can afford radical nonviolence. If you can afford radical nonviolence, then everything that you take is a very good thing. But otherwise, like in the only violent day during the Taiwan Occupy Sunflower movement was when the students decided to occupy also the administration building. And when we have the surveillance, the cameras that occupy with the students, and students and the police all behave kind of civilized, but the other wing, where we don't have the civil journalists taking real-time footage, it became very violent, and actually was a lot of political brutality. But because both are happening, of course the violence narrative would win, and the radical nonviolence would get drowned out, and then everybody gets being sued afterwards. So I think one of the lessons is that one should, or we need to keep to the lowercase internet, the private or mesh networking, where we have guaranteed or at least somewhat confident security, not relying on the public internet infrastructure. And when we have the radical nonviolence critical mass, we switch to this very publicly visible way to communicate to the public.
So we'll have Min, and then there's one question from a remote user, and then after that, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up.
I think I want to share my experience with the protests in Vietnam. That I used to organize, be the one of the organizer of the protests, and it's really successful. But I have to say that the social media and the internet is somehow like it have a double side, that is bad side and good side. Like after that, we know that one of the protests were organized by the government. They sent the police to organize a protest to collect the information of some of the protesters. And like I'm one of the one who used the group, and then all the name of the people who inside the group were in the blacklist of the police. So it's really you need to be really careful about when you organizing something on Facebook or on the internet. Or secondly, like when the live streaming is really useful, because in a protest maybe the police will come and violent and hit you, and if there's someone who can record it, it will be like evidence, and it's really good for the campaign when the people see how people are cheating. But it also can be like the privacy were being there, and now when every time they have a protest, the police in Vietnam, they bring a lot of camera and going around just like a journalist, and point out the camera in the face and ask the question, who are you, why are you here, and people just answer the question because they think that they don't wear the police uniform. And that is, I think I have to say that Vietnam's government is really smart in using social media. Yeah, and they have a lot of blog. Like they have even a very huge amount of people. The blog, they are blogger, and they give out a lot of information just like protester. But again, that are the protester, and they're trying to like make the conflict between the protester. And that's it. Yeah, so it's really hard for us in Vietnam working like this.
Okay, so we've got the last 4 minutes, and we have one remote question. I mean, a question from a remote user. How are counterterrorism activities used against freedom of expression and assembly and association? I think to some extent we've been discussing this, but would you like to perhaps answer that more directly?
I think in the beginning, I gave this example of Reclaim the Mosques campaign that was started on Facebook. So this was actually a counter-terrorism activity because this clergy in the mosque was giving very extremist ideas and sermons, and he was like very clearly supporting ISIS and asking actually the government to declare jihad and everything, like all that sort. So that campaign actually started around the idea that he is not actually representing the real interpretation of the religion. So and the religious space is actually for us, for the people, for the users, for the religious followers to go and worship. So let's reclaim our space and let's have these radical people, move out of our spaces. So that was a very, I think very positive and successful example of counterterrorism, I would say, in the country, and it actually got much appreciation as well. Being the conservative society, I would say that was a very good example.
Okay, so we have to wrap up. Thank you. This has been a really thoroughly interesting and exciting conversation we've had. across. I'm sorry if we weren't able to accommodate any comments or if there's anything else. Just to close up, I wanted to request you that this is actually an issue that we feel very strongly about. And we would really appreciate it if we could find ways to collaborate with as many of you as possible, because more friends are better than less friends, and more allies are, of course, better than less allies. And it would be great if we've also, if you have ideas on how we can engage with multi-stakeholders, how we can approach the government, how we can together, do something about this. Or if there are experiences in your countries that you would like to share with us, or if you would like us to also see how we can share our work with you, please let us know. We will still be around for the next couple of days. We can catch up and see what we can do together. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.